Okay, welcome everybody. We are right on the hour and it looks like a few of you are streaming in. I'm just going to take a minute here and so they're not coming in mid-conversation. Thank you all for being on time so far. My name is Kevin Whelan. Most of you know me through promoting this and being on my email list. If you don't, I'm a marketing consultant. I've been doing web design for almost 20 years. I've been doing digital marketing for about a decade, and then working in the co-working industry for about five going on 6 years now. So I just now focus on helping co-working spaces get full in a typical market. And right now my focus is on really just helping co-working spaces navigate the uncertainty, of the near kind of future, right? Everything is sort of changed and it keeps changing by the minute and by the hour. So my focus really right now is not on getting you full, but really preparing you to get full for the future and kind of weathering the storm. So while we have some people trickling in, looks like, yeah, everybody's coming in okay. I'm going to introduce you to Sean. So Sean Eikerman here is on the call. Sean is from Cultivate Advisors, and he has a ton of experience both in co-working and outside of co-working. So he has got the benefit of specialization and expertise working in co-working, as well as he'll talk about this maybe, but tons of years both running businesses. He was a former chief revenue officer. He had an Airbnb for boats, which he developed from scratch and then eventually sold within 3 years. He's led top line growth. He's just a great guy to have. What we figured out for his positioning is that he's kind of like having a business partner that you don't have to pay equity to. So, he's a great advisor. So he works with tons of co-working spaces. In particular with like, there's the whole swath of your business, but also the finances and the operations and kind of making, he's the guy of this call. He's going to help you weather the sort of the current imminent sort of storm, if you will. And then I'm going to take over about midway through and talk about what can you be doing from a communication standpoint and what does your marketing look like, given that everything has changed, right? The entire landscape of marketing communications have just completely changed in the last couple of weeks. So helping you to kind of, prepare for the future for when demand comes back. I'm sure most of you have seen it screech to a halt. So we're going to prepare for that. A couple little housekeeping items as well. If you want to ask questions, we encourage them. We'll take them at the very end. You can use the Q&A button at the very bottom. Try not to use the chat for questions because it can be sometimes difficult to get through them. If we can answer them along the way, we will, but I won't be able to see them when the slides are open. So probably it's just going to happen at the very end. There will be a recording of this. We're recording it right now, and we'll make it available to you as well as anyone who may have missed this in the future, as well as some notes and the slides as well. So just, relax, enjoy as much as you can and take notes and but don't worry too much about missing any information because it'll all be available for you. So in the interest of time, because we've got a lot to cover, Sean, I'll let you take over here. You can maybe share off. Again, if you've got any questions, drop them in the Q&A tab at the bottom of the screen and we'll get to them towards the end.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kevin. I'm just sharing my screen here, guys. 1 second. Great. Okay. Well, again, thanks from my side. I appreciate you taking the time. This is unprecedented wild times, obviously. Everyone's really doing what they can to help a lot of small businesses out. And nobody fully knows all the answers right now, right? I think there's a lot of anxiety swirling around timelines, especially in the co-working space. How long is this stuff going to last for? What should I be doing right now? And not only in the co-working space, but in every industry, right? There's downstream impacts, there's immediate impacts all over the place. So listen, I want to make a couple declarations off the top. One, we don't know everything at all, of course. We're taking a lot of the information we're seeing from our clients. Kevin and I both work with about 12 or 13 other businesses each in co-working and outside. So we're taking our learnings and we want to distill them down for you. And really what we want to do is slow things down today. There's a lot of anxiety around the future. So we just want to make sure that people are saying, okay, listen, I'm going to pump the brakes here. And I want to think a little bit about how do I bring in the resources I need? How do I talk to my team? How do I talk to my clients? And how do I navigate the next few months and build for the future? So the first thing that I always say is you got to cover home base. You got to cover home base. It's kind of like the oxygen mask on first principle, and that is taking care of the finances. And so what I mean by that is cash flow forecasting. I've been working a lot with my clients lately on mapping out and scenario planning cash flow. And so this is really looking at what your P&L will look like in the future based on several assumptions. And what I like to do is do a best case scenario forecast. What does it look like if I'm in the co-working space to have minimal growth throughout 2020, a little bit of impact on membership, but best case scenario, we're sort of steady Eddie. Most probable case is we're going to see obviously some drop, right? So what does that look like? And then worst case is, listen, this is going to be a significant drop in the next 2 months, let's say, and it's going to last a lot longer than everyone anticipates. It could be 6 months, 7 months. What does that do to cash flow? And really what that allows you to do is answer a lot of big decisions. And a lot of these decisions are swirling around right now, right? What costs do I cut right now? I don't want to shoot myself in the foot right now. Like, what do I do? What do I focus on? How do I cut my costs to manage the future? How do I manage my members and my clients? How do I talk to them? How do I get clear on my service offering? How do I best manage my team, my employees? And then what options do I have for additional cash, right? Like the government's talking a lot about what they're doing to support people. You know, that's getting clearer by the day. But what options do I have right now? What steps can I take? So what I would like to do is just talk about modeling first. So what I've done is I've created a cash flow forecast template for co-working spaces, as well for other businesses, maybe businesses that are in an agency space, or if you're working with a traditional cost of goods sold model where you're having to pay labor for services delivered or materials, if you're a drywalling company. So I've created two different models. And the first one I want to walk you through is the co-working side. So I've created a best case scenario. I've created a sort of a price drop scenario if you wanted to drop prices as a co-working space. And that really kind of looks at what's most probably going to happen with your membership. And then a worst case scenario. And then I have also a model that looks at a weekly cash flow plan for a traditional business. So as Kevin said, I'm going to make these available, and I'm more than happy to walk people through this one-on-one if you need, or to create your own cash flow forecast. But I got to tell you, if you have one of these, my God, the anxiety just comes right down because at least you know. I mean, it's really important to understand the impacts and what possibly could happen. So I just want to quickly walk through this. This allows you to take a look at the different products as a co-working space you have, what that product is, what the product pricing is per month, and the total. And then what we look at is across the top, we have the different months, obviously. This allows you to change the membership. It allows you to change the pricing. And then that overlays on top of some of your fixed and variable costs, right? Which gives you an indication of your profit and loss at the end of the month, as well as the cash beginning and ending at the end of the month. So if we were to go and adjust membership, we could start to see, okay, well, what does this do to cash? We can also look at what costs are we going to take down, and then how does that impact the P&L? How does that impact the end of the profitability at the end of 2020, and how does that impact cash? Now, I'm not going to spend a ton of time diving into this. I just wanted to share this with you as a resource, and we'll get back to kind of moving on and some of the tips that I think a lot of you want to know about, which is sort of managing communication to clients and what levers you have access to. So I want to move on to those. So the first thing is expenses, obviously, right? The thing is that now you have an understanding of the cash flow forecast, how that will impact possibly the assumptions, how those assumptions will impact your cash flow, and then what do you have access to? So I recommend putting your expenses in really two columns. The first is revenue generating expenses that are investments into revenue gen and and helping you stay viable in the market. And then expenses that aren't revenue generating, but you might need for certain ops. So I want you to take at least a 10 to 20% at least haircut on the expenses. I think that's something that everybody can do. There is a ton of opportunity to negotiate with suppliers, more than you think, including rent and including some of the tech subscriptions that you have access to. There's a lot of opportunity there, and we're finding more and more as the days goes on, people leaning into that with their suppliers, having conversations more about long-term relationships then, and helping to ease some of the short-term cash pain. If you can, try and cut as much as 30% of your expenses, really those expenses that are non-revenue generating and are least impactful to daily ops. If you need help with this, or if you need somebody to help you walk this through, Kevin and I absolutely would be more than happy to jump on the phone. First, the second piece is accounts receivable. Call your accounts receivable, any accounts receivable that are sitting out there right now, call them yesterday. You're trying to bring that cash in as soon as possible and possibly offer 1 to 5% off the invoice if needed in order to get that through. Finally, accounts payable. Call all suppliers, as I said. There's a lot of flexibility on the landlord side we're finding. Picking up the phone and saying, hey, listen, can we do a pay later scheme, or can we lessen the sort of paying right now in the next 2 to 3 months in order to pay this back at the other end of 2020 or 2021. There are printers, there are food suppliers, there are other vendors. Call all of the suppliers and have conversations about what's possible. It's not about gouging people or pushing things or trying to screw anybody over. It is about having honest conversations with your suppliers about what can you both do for each other to help support each other through this time. Very important. Finally, not finally, but moving on to the kind of one of the largest expenses, and that is payroll. There's pros and cons around this, keeping people on board versus scaling back hours versus the temporary layoff side. A lot of co-working spaces out there are choosing the temporary layoff angle due to the fact that EI is being really leaned into right now, and the government is taking on some of that cost for the short term. Having that clear communication with your team about, okay, when this starts to turn around, what does that mean for a return? But this is really answered in the modeling exercise more than anything else. But it is about being super clear with the plan over the next 3 months, and then that communication with your team. And finally, get access to cash. So there's the SBA Disaster Relief Loans. I know right now there is a huge backlog. There is a lot of wait times. I'd say get in the queue regardless. Get in there. It's helpful to have access to as much cash as possible. In Canada, there's the BDC entrepreneurship subsidies and grants and loans. There's payroll subsidies that allow you to keep deductions up to $1,300 per employee and up to $25,000 in Canada, up to $25,000 per employer. And then if you have an existing loan or a line of credit, try and extend that, try and get as much as you can. That's the easiest thing. If you have something like that already in place, see what you can do to maximize that. I know banks are just getting slammed right now, but it is important to have obviously access to these pieces. If you need, again, help navigating this stuff, please let Kevin and I know. Finally, it's about communication directly to your customers and to your team. The first thing that after modeling it out, it's really important right now to take that 2020 plan that you worked really hard on in November, in December, or in January, and it's really about kind of like putting that on the shelf. You really have to hit the reset button for 2020 goals at this point. The world's a bit of a different place, and it's important to reread your vision statement at this point. What do you really want, and who do you want to be during this time? But it is about taking a new cut at a plan and co-creating that with your team. Make assumptions around those A, B, and C scenarios and say, listen, this is what we want out of 2020 now. It's a different world, and hitting that reset button is a really grounding experience for you and your team. Finally, you want to be agile during this time. You set those goals out for the long term, but they're based on assumptions. Right now, we have to be really quick and agile. So in the next 3 months, break that up into 6 2-week sprints and take a traditional agile approach. If any of you guys are in the tech space or development, you'll know agile quite well. That is defining what's going on, what the problem is, designing a solution around it, building that solution out, testing it, and then releasing or deploying it. It can be the same in business. This is something that you can do every 2 weeks with your team just to check in on how things are going, and then communicate those checkpoints with your team internally, saying every 2 weeks we are going to check in on this. Every week we are going to see how our communication is playing, how people are responding, how is that communication tone with our clients going, and then seeing if we need to pivot in the next 2 weeks. It's really about being agile right now. And then calling all of your clients. At this point, every single member, picking up the phone, listening first, asking how things are going for them, seeing if there's any support you can offer, and connect as a human being. That's very, very important at this time, is just to call all your clients and check in. It's super important. And finally, be clear about your service and your billing expectations with your clients, at least for the next 3 months. There is a bunch of schools of thought on this in the co-working space right now. There's a lot of folks that are taking their monthly members and they're dropping them down to a virtual membership because they're leaning heavily into virtual services for the month of April and possibly May, right? That modeling exercise is really important to see the cash impact there. There's also an opportunity to take a look at saying, listen, members, we might need to reduce for the rest of the year. If you guys were to stick with us for the next year, for the rest of 2020, we are going to take a significant discount on your membership in order to retain people. And on the other side of that, allow them to benefit for sticking with you, and then paying it back on the other end in 2021. So there's options there in order to retain members, because you've paid a lot of money to get those folks through the door. They want to stick with you, but you got to meet them halfway, or else I believe, and Kevin and I share the sentiment, that it's going to be challenging to keep people at status quo pricing through this time. That conversation is going to come up. So it's about modeling that first and then being super clear with your stance. How is that going to impact? What's the best thing to do? Is it the best thing to take people down to a virtual membership? Is it the best thing to keep status quo and just lean heavily into the virtual side of things, hoping that this storm will blow over in a month? That's where that agile methodology comes in, where you can really start to see kind of how things are playing out with this COVID forecast. But a lot of co-working spaces are shut down right now. A lot of co-working spaces are actually voluntarily shutting down right now, just due to health concerns and the protection of their members in their community. This conversation is coming up all over the place. And so it's about having a stance and knowing that, listen, we're going to take this hit. Profit for 2020 might be written off. But at this point, it's like, what are we going to do to lean in and be service oriented with our membership in order to set us up for the back end of 2020 and 2021 to pick back up where we left off? We really believe that co-working as an industry is going to be strengthened by this, because people are going to start to realize they need more flexible options in terms of offices, as well as community is extremely important. People may be a little gun shy on the other end of this due to these issues and health concerns. But what can we do to make sure that we are meeting folks halfway through this time and requesting that they stick with you? Then finally, plan something for the future. Stick something in the calendar saying, listen, in July, in early August, we are doing an event. Hopefully by this point, things will be calmed down. The dust will have settled. I believe it's really important to communicate something very positive in the future, saying, hey, listen, we are still here. We're going to be leaning into this time. This is what we're doing for our folks. We're having a big event at our space. And we're going to, more communication will come there. It'll help keep folks focused on the future. And if things start to develop or change, that always can be moved or shifted. but it is important to keep that eye long-term. Don't just focus on the next 3 weeks. Have something in the future that you can look forward to and build to. So I'm going to pass, so that was my section around just getting clear on the numbers, understanding where you are, forecasting those scenarios, and then just getting clear on the communication, with your team, staying agile, and then being clear with your service offering to your members. I can't tell you what's right for you. We'd have to dig into the models and see what would be the most appropriate thing. But I definitely believe, as a sentiment, meeting folks halfway through this time is only going to help you long term. And you need to have access to the levers and pull every lever you can right now in order to stay financially viable during this time, because it is going to be a challenging and bumpy couple months.
That's Sean. And, I think if anyone has any kind of cash flow related questions, Sean would be the guy to speak to. His contact info will be at the very end. We're going to play into all of this is you're kind of placing a bet. So like, how long do you anticipate, things to be a little bit down, or how long do you anticipate it's going to be before people are fully back into co-working spaces? So like what Sean was saying, if you can find a way to retain members, maybe even reducing some of the costs, but then they stay longer, and then so they get, a cheaper office, and then having that maybe even trickle or feed into 2021 as sort of a thank you and an ability to recoup some of those months where rent, wasn't being used or membership fees weren't being used, may help. So meeting people halfway is a great thing, but it really depends on what your bet is and how long you think this whole thing is going to last. So there's no obvious answers, but I think working with someone like Sean or doing the math here on your own is going to really, really help you to at least alleviate some of the anxiety or know what your runway is. So I'm going to take over the screen here, and I'm going to kind of pivot into talking about, into communications and marketing. So, right now, I think the last thing you want to do, and I'm just going to take over, Sean, if you don't mind, is the last thing you want to do is get into a place where you're not communicating or you're completely hiding, and that's not really going to serve. That's not going to serve you, and it's not going to serve anybody. So what we want to do is think about how do we go on the offense here, assuming you're going to be in business. How do we kind of ready you so that when demand inevitably comes back, and it will. Your main goal now is to get through this and survive and to innovate. This is the best time in the world to innovate. But how are you going to communicate during these times? And that's kind of what I'm going to cover before we get into a little bit more of the marketing style stuff. So in terms of broader, member and public communications, I think you kind of want a strategy going into it. And, we've had enough time now to see how, other co-working spaces have communicated around COVID-19 coronavirus. The big kind of takeaways that I'm seeing in terms of a successful communication strategy is really being empathetic with your staff, with your employee, or with your members, and with the public. So really just not taking it too lightly from a communication standpoint. Really, I wrote an article in this where if there's a baton and one end is a worry end and one end is the taking it seriously end, or one end is the relaxed end, one end is the worried or taking it seriously end, just pick up the worried or taking it seriously end so that your clients, members, staff can relax, so show them that you're taking it seriously. We've seen WeWork receive a bit of criticism for continuing to charge members full rent. And then the counter argument to that is, well, that's what rent is you pay it, that's your obligation. So there's just really, you're in a very tricky situation, and everyone is sort of, interpreting this new reality a little bit differently. So just being as tactful as you can and really considering whatever message you put out there from all perspectives, is kind of the best sort of strategy. Be abundantly cautious with everything you do. Focus on safety, obviously. Close or open, but then really explain the reasons for those and be able to stand by them. In terms of communicating, I think the best kind of core way to do that is obviously to reach out one-to-one to all of your members, like Sean just mentioned, and really just taking the temperature and seeing what situation each of your members are in. They're going to be in vastly different situations depending on the type of co-working or flexible office space. But have a page on your website would be my recommendation. So in addition to sending them emails and periodic updates, have a page on your website that reflects kind of the state of things today And at any time, someone could go back and reference that. And anytime you update it, send that email to your subscribers and your members, just letting them know that, as news progresses, you're going to keep them abreast of that. And you can link to that page on your website. Also, if anyone goes to your website, you want them to be able to immediately find what the situation is, if you will, in your co-working space, given the current climate and current, realities. And it does vary city by city, country by country. We've got people on this webinar from around the world, so it's going to be different everywhere. But the best thing you can do is have a page, make it obvious, make it easy to find. So don't let them dig through your blog to find this, or through some weird pages. And the best way to do that is to put a banner along the top of your site that says, here's how we're, navigating the COVID-19 sort of situation at our co-working space. Click here to learn more. So that every page has that at the very top of the website, and it links to that page. So that's your authoritative piece of content on the site. Here's an example from Convene, just one of many, who has a similar message to this, where they've got a blue banner along the very top. You can't miss it on their site when you go to their website. And then you can see here, it's got a last updated message, as well as just the current state of affairs. And I know they've closed several workspaces, and several more of them are open. But really just getting super clear and just trying to navigate this kind of difficult form of communication as best you can, and be ready to stand by what you're doing. I'm currently putting together a resource with a number of different examples of things like this, of other co-working spaces. Most of them are corporate, the larger guys for now, because I know they've put a lot of thought into it and they've done a reasonably good job of communicating. But over time, I'll send you a link to this at the end here, but over time I'll be adding more examples, so you can kind of just keep an eye on what others are saying and doing as well. So now that we're kind of in that, we've communicated to the public, so we're sending emails, we have a place on our website, that's great. We're kind of active on social media, updating people when there's sort of news related to this thing. We need to remember that we're still in business, and we don't know how long this is going to last. And honestly, the worst thing you can do is just stop marketing. If you stop marketing, you slowly become irrelevant, or people just, they're not thinking of you, so that when the time comes to make an office decision, you don't come first to mind, and you're not top of mind. It's also an opportunity to really establish what you stand for as a company, and to really kind of set a brand and kind of create a standard for what you represent. So if anything, what you want to do is take a leadership position, but just remember that the context has entirely changed. So if you're doing the things that you've always been doing to market your space, and you've got those scheduled blog posts or those scheduled emails, like, I would just put all of that on pause and really just think, how can I serve and add the most value to the conversation? And that's my marketing. Marketing is now not about self-promotion. That there'll come a time for that, but right now it's about, how do I serve my community? How do I serve my members? How do I serve my prospects? And that's what marketing is going to look like. It's going to kind of be less sales oriented, which it always kind of should be. It should always be in service. But every message has to go through the lens of, am I being empathetic to the public who might have, someone who is ill right now with this, or is very concerned, or is not very concerned, or is, am I really considering all the perspectives here? Because, there's a lot, this is a global pandemic. So everyone is really we're all going through this experience together, but everyone is experiencing it a bit differently. So just putting it through the lens as much as empathy as possible is the best way to go about it. So there's a few things I want to cover. There's lots you can do with your marketing, and I really want to focus on things that you can do for no or low cost. So I'm sure most of you are still in reaction mode. You're going online, you're doing all these, you're taking your community online, you're managing communications, you're doing negotiations. There's a lot. People are putting out fires. But there will come a time where, depending on how long this goes, where you'll have a little bit more time to breathe. You won't be focused on the day-to-day operations as much. You'll be more focused on member management, member communication, and marketing, and preparing for the future. My hunch is that corporate co-working is going to come back stronger than ever. So I think people in traditional offices are realizing just how stuck they are to a 5 or 10 year lease, and they're going to be looking at things like co-working as the choice they should have always made. People have been working from home for a long time, or people have been working from offices that are now working from home. So companies are now able to say, this remote work thing might actually work, and I can hire someone in the remote part of wherever and have them work for our company. And I'll pay for their co-working space, so they have an environment that they can work in that's professional. So I think there'll be a little bit more remote work coming our way as well. I also think that a lot of people will be reevaluating their options. So some people will naturally drop off and not renew their co-working membership, especially if they have that option. So when they come up for air, when they start looking for co-working again, and I use co-working and flexible office interchangeably, But when they start looking for co-working again, they're going to be starting from scratch, and they're going to be, even if they were happy with your space, you better believe they're going to be looking at all the available options. So you want to be prime and ready to go for when that time comes. You don't want to be just like kind of sitting and hunkering down and waiting. And this isn't a vacation. If you're an entrepreneur or a community manager, like this is, and you're still getting paid, this is the time to go on the offense. Is, you know, that's what's going to really set you up for success and help you kind of capture as much as you can in the remainder of the year. So the first part is really just kind of thinking and strategizing. So use this as an opportunity to evaluate everything. You know, look at your current situation. Look at what your weaknesses were. Like, are all of your memberships month to month? Could you be, you know, upping the bar in what you deliver so that most of your memberships are 6 months or a year? Like, are you differentiated enough so that when people are all looking again, like you actually have a competitive advantage in your corner? So you're not just competing head to head with anyone. You should be really in a category of one if you can do that. You know, I'd spend the time thinking about who your ideal members have been. So your ideal member are the people who use the space the most, spend the most, stay the longest, refer you the most, are the happiest. You know, those are your ideal members. And really, you probably have one ideal member for each individual type of service, maybe two. But focusing on who they are and really getting clear on it, and then just point all of your marketing at that one individual person for each service or what have you, or maybe two people, but think of real people and really use that to reframe the rest of your marketing and say, does this actually speak to that best customer, that best member that we have? You know, and the other thing is kind of visualizing your future. You know, you've now seen what's made you vulnerable. You've now seen what's been a strength in terms of, you know, whether members are staying, what kind of commitment levels you have. Some co-working spaces can command an entire year and they only do 1 year memberships. And that comes down to your leverage, and that comes down to your originality and the value you bring to the market. So, you know, really just use this time to think back and say, what have been my strengths? What have been my weaknesses? And what do I need to do for the future to set myself up so that I'm one of a kind, so that people will drive by other co-working spaces to come to mine in the future? Because that's the market, that's the kind of space you want to be in. You know, this thing is going to demolish anyone who isn't competitive, you know, and that's just the unfortunate side effect of is it that made your business strong or weak, and really think about, especially from a marketing standpoint, what you can do to capitalize on track. The next thing, or very little, depending, you know, on what your approach is sort of audit everything. You know, look through all of the data again from scratch. Go into your, you know, and if you don't know how to do this, I'd offer training on this, but go through and look and see how your search engine traffic been performing. How have your, you know, export all of your data from your Google Ads account or your Facebook ads. And if you don't know how to do that, ask your ads person to do that, who should probably be on pause. We can talk about that later. But export it and look like, what keyword, what has our cost per conversion been? What has our cost per acquisition been? Are we tracking those kinds of things? You know, which social media posts have been performing thing that's given us the most results, you know, in the past sort of 12 months? Where have we been spending our money? And are we just kind of spending $100 or $200 here or there on tools that we don't even really use, or on, you know, people that aren't, you know, contributing to the bottom line? So it's just a good opportunity to really peek under every rock and to really get efficient as much as you can. You're probably already doing this with your expenses and scaling back as much as you can, which you should be doing. But yeah, so you're already doing this, but really look at the data and find the 80-20 as much as you can. So what has been the 20% of things that have had 80% of the results? Because it's probably right in front of your face, and you've been too busy reacting to the day-to-day management of your business to really know that, hey, 80% of our business comes from referral. Referrals come from 20% of our members, or something equally. And those, you know, those people who do refer came from one particular source, whether it's Google Ads or other referrals. Like, find out what that thing is that's truly driving your business, and then find ways to optimize for that in the future, whether that's incentivizing referrals or just rewarding your best members, or, you know, find ways to really double down to be efficient until your cash comes back in hand. There's a good book called Guerrilla Marketing if you want marketing tactics when, you know, that don't cost very much that have big impacts. So that's kind of in the audit phase of things, you know, and then I would also use this as a time to get organized. There's a good chance, you know, you've got stuff in folders and in inboxes, and, you know, your logo file, your brand book is kind of still in an inbox somewhere, and your social media graphics are saved on someone's computer. Now is the time to have a folder structure. And I talk about this in my membership and offer training on this, but have a folder structure where it's got like your brand assets in a folder, any of your projects in one folder, any other tools need, processes, have that in a folder, put that on Dropbox or Google Drive is what I would use and kind of recommend. But make sure it's organized and get it in one place. Like you might as well. And if you still have a marketing manager or a community manager working for you, just make sure and ready to go for, when you need it again in the future. It's always a good time to kind of clear your workstation, if you will, when times get. The next point is on measurement. So I think a lot of people go fly by the seat of their pants. I've seen co-working spaces that are several locations large and are still figuring things out and flying by the seat of their pants with very little data, at least from a marketing standpoint at their fingertips. You don't get very far without financial tied in, but a lot of people leave the market. They've reached a certain size where they can no longer afford not to track certain things. So, in terms of kind of getting clear on your measurement, setting up goals in Google Analytics, having a KPI document. So I also provide a document that looks a lot like Sean's kind of cash flow statement, where month over month KPIs and, really just put it all into month over month columns, sometimes week over week. Cost per acquisition, like how much we're paying to get each new member, which is number of new members divided by total marketing costs in that month per lead, and then breaking it down. So really just checking, like, are you actually, how many people fill out your contact form? How many leads? How many people are starting a live chat? How many people are calling you on yourself on the phone number on your website? Really just getting clear on all of those key conversion points is going to really help you, so that when you do come back, the data to really know whether you're making good purchase decisions. And the next part is the thing that reluctant to do. There's a great book called Work the System, and really checklist manifesto. Totally great books. But what they kind of advocate for and what I recommend is documenting anything that gets done more than once. So you have a process and maybe even decisions. So what I usually do is I get a document and I write down all the things that need to get done daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, annually. And I make sure that I just know what the things are that need to be done in those increments. And then I have a process for each of those individual things. Post to your website, adding, posting on social media, scheduling stuff out, sending out an email newsletter, have a process for it and update that periodically over time. It can be as simple as a Google Doc with written, using a tool like Loom just to record certain things. And really what that does is it makes your business systemized. It makes it more valuable as an asset. If you were to consider getting investors or to sell the business one day, you kind of have a method and a process for everything, especially lead gen. So really just taking the time to document how you do things. It'll allow you to delegate the work in the future. It also removes the key man risk, where one person in the organization knows how to do everything and no one else does. It's all in that person's head. So having a document like that is really just going to set you up again in so many ways. So it's a good practice to get into. So during these downtimes, it's all about when you're getting organized and what can you do to kind of document things as well. Now, I think most of you are pretty actively working in the community, and I think that's the right move. Everyone will have a different sort of culture working space. Some are very connected. Members, are very connected with one another, and you've really others are more, it's, kind of closed door, don't really talk to one another, but maybe pass each other in the hallway. Whatever it is, I think as you're still taking membership fees from people, either for virtual services or, for their obligated office and membership fees, bringing that community online and really keeping them close and doing as much as you can to contribute value of yourself. This is where the innovation piece comes in, thinking of yourself, but a facilitator of success for your clients. So really, like, times like this force you to really innovate and to break the mold in terms of what you traditionally, honest with you, you don't offer for everything except 4 walls and a desk. And that includes things like identity and experience and all, these other factors. So what does it mean to foster your community? Well, a lot of people are bringing people into Slack groups right now, and I have one of these for co-working space owners. Many of you already have one of those or kind of have a very light version of it. So a lot of people are building that community in Slack. They're checking in daily. They're doing breakfasts, coffees. They're doing happy hours. They're doing webinars. Some people are doing those like daily. Like, people are really doubling down in the community and really just trying to maintain those relationships. Other ideas would be to do like a networking thing where everyone gets to talk about what kind of business they're in, what their situation is, and see if anybody can help one another, whether that's referrals or helping them out even just for free, or, you know, really kind of talking about the business. Because remember, you're facilitating your member success. You're not just providing office space. And this may not seem like marketing, but it is. You're marketing to your members, but you're really just nurturing those relationships with your members. And that can really have a big effect in terms of their commitment to you, both during and after this whole kind of situation. What else? I think also there's a time for entertainment. So we talked about, you know, doing breakfast and coffees and stuff. You know, people are looking for a bit of a break. Like this is for a lot of people, this is a very stressful time, either financially, emotionally. Like a lot of us are trapped in our homes, you know, and finding ways to create fun and just, you know, a good vibe within your community is a really great piece of marketing, but also just kind of the right thing to do. The next point is something that I haven't really been banging on the drum too much in terms of philosophies around marketing your co-working space, but I think right now is a perfect time to consider, you know, in most industries, like, you know, in many industries, having an audience is a really great asset. So you may have a really great Instagram account, you might have a great email following, you might have a great, you know, you might be popular on LinkedIn, but I think now more than ever, it's about how do you create content, you know, really doubling down on content that really takes a stance, that stands for something, that shows your values. And really this comes from the owner and kind of should trickle into your marketing. But now is the time to sort of create value, create content, really focus on the needs of your target and your current members, and really just like creating resources and good stuff that your members latch onto. So taking a leadership role and communicating as much as you can so in the future, you know, people will have come across you in all these various channels, and when they're making a they're more likely to think of or follow or choose you. So think about it in terms of that. You can also partner with other local businesses, restaurants and whatnot, and, you know, see if there's ways to kind of leverage each other's kind of audiences or community and really just try to cross-pollinate these groups. So now's the time to really sort of build this ecosystem online outside of your existing members, but also including your existing members. And that kind of brings us to another point is, you know, nurturing your relationships. So chances are you've worked with brokers over the years, and they're also in a very similar situation. Their business is hit just as, you know, as hard as yours, whatever, but checking in with your partners, your suppliers. You know, if you haven't got a CRM, now might be a good time to do that as well. While you've got some downtime, there's some pretty low cost CRM options. My preference is Active Campaign. That's what I'll be focused on and teaching a lot more of in the future. But nurturing those relationships is going to be key, because you're going to come out on the other end of this. And to the extent that you were thinking about others and not just yourself is really going to be a lasting impact on your brand and on, you know, just the relationships that are going to be there for you, and just being there for others is really going to help. So I think that's kind of a really big piece that often gets overlooked. You know, and then another point is, you know, learning and tinkering. So I think, you know, like investing in, like, you know, inexpensive or some courses, like, or just tinkering with those softwares that you were planning on using, you know, whether it's, I like Gather Up for Net Promoter Score surveys, or using SurveyMonkey to do surveys in the future, just to figure things out and to kind of learn maybe for free or on a cheap plan. Using Loom as a video recording tool, which you can send to members as well as do training videos with, screen shares. There's all kinds of stuff, but, you know, now's the time to learn. Like, if and when you have downtime, I know right now you're putting out fires, but the way I've always learned in marketing is just by trying stuff and tinkering and putting in tons of time and making and fumbling through things until I've learned it. So I highly recommend, you know, just tinkering, have some fun with it, you know, get blog posts written. My goodness, you should try it. Email it to me and I'll take a look at it for you before you send it out. But, you know, tinker with stuff, try stuff. Marketing can be fun. Just remember to do it in a contextual manner and just explore. You know, marketing is a fun thing. Just a quick anecdote, you know, I went to school for 1 year at a postgraduate degree program at a local college for entrepreneurship, and they taught me one of everything. So I have accounting, tax, finance, marketing, business, law, the whole works. What I learned from that is that I have a high level understanding of everything, but I know I'll never be a tax person. But you know what? I can manage that tax process a lot better, or that my bookkeeper, and I'll never be a bookkeeper. I can manage them a lot better because I spent time learning a little bit about the various areas of business, and the same applies for marketing. So whether your goal isn't to become the best doer, although it might get you by in the to become the best manager you can be if you're the owner, or to just learn new skills that like content marketing to kind of tie you over in the meantime, or to do yourself during your downtime. One of the there's only a few more points here, and then we'll take kind of questions at the end. But one of the other big and important points is looking at all the touch points of your brand, whether that's your LinkedIn page, your Instagram page, your website, and cleaning things up. So improving the design of things. Is there an opportunity? And this is where you could either, so that everything is nice and sharp, or if cash is really tight, just things up and make your website a bit cleaner, and optimize, like for conversions, contact forms on every page, or call to actions. So cleaning up the website design. Also things like your local directories. So sometimes we'll post on Yelp or Upsuite or Google My Business and not really think about it for several months later. Now is the time to upload the best photos and to weed out the bad photos. Are working really well. Your phone numbers are all accurate and up to date. The descriptions are all accurate and up to date. So really just going through all those directories and touch points, whether they're on your site or not, social media, really that your brand interfaces with the world, even your brochures, and just ask yourself, is this still representative of the company you want to be? And use this time to tweak and optimize and improve that if you can. The other point is, around making smart investments. So, I think, we're all placing bets here on how long this thing is going to take to get back to normal, but there's a case to be made for not spending zero money. And if you have access to capital, if you're in high growth mode, I work with a lot of multi-location co-working spaces who have committed to 3 or 4 other locations this year. And you know what, if you're not preparing for that, then you're going to be flat-footed when the time comes that the doors open again. So making smart investments. So things like, if you're going to redesign your website anyway, and you have some capital that it could be small relative to your access, to the capital you have access to. So redesign it, redevelop it. I was working with one client, they posted a job on a job board, and they ended up getting an agency that has, major Fortune 500 web design for that are doing a site for like $5,000 right now. So in this current climate, you can get things cheap, like Sean was saying, but negotiating with your suppliers. Many of them are out there just trying to keep the lights on their own businesses and are willing to do work for a fraction of what they would normally charge. So just keep an eye out for that, and consider your investments where you can, because this might be the best time to make engine optimization. So while everyone else is going dormant, you may want to be putting a little bit into your SEO so that you start ranking a little bit better and you're starting to move the needle, cleaning up areas of your website that need to, there's a whole bunch of things you can do from an SEO standpoint, but make sure that you have your cash flow really figured out first. And if you're at all close, I would say DIY as much as you can in the meantime. Don't go spending money because this winter could last a bit. So it's really about staying in business for the rest of the year, making profit in 2021. It's kind of my mantra. What else? Oh, and so in terms of your ads, I think a lot of people have been asking me, should I be running ads right now? And the question is, I think what you should probably be doing is potentially putting your ads person on pause, and not paying a management fee. If they've been performing reasonably well for a long enough time, like your Google ads, chances are no one's clicking on it, and set a very low budget so that you don't exceed, money by accident, especially if you're not touring. But you may want to keep a couple ads running. You may want to keep a few of your best performers, like your private offices, running. Inquiring minds, people who they've got downtime, they're thinking about the future and where they may want to work again when things get back to normal. You just want to be kind of generally in proximity for when people are searching for co-working. It's never a bad idea, because you only pay per click. You're not really spending a lot of money there. So consider it, but it's very contextual to your situation. So I'm not saying you should continue to spend money on ads, especially if you're not touring, but that's just an option that you may want to consider as well. And just kind of the last piece for you. So I am very bullish on the co-working industry as it's going to come back. When, we don't know, but I think it's really important to have an offer ready. So I know co-working spaces that are opening now. I work with a couple that are like in the midst of opening, and that's going to be tough for a little bit. But what you can do is have an offer that for the rest of the year and into thing. So having a good offer that, like, hey, if you want to commit for the rest of 2020, we're giving you a stellar price, or if you want to commit for when we do open the doors, and you put cash down as a first or second month deposit, we'll lock you in, secure that, then you gain some cash right away. So having a good offer on your website that is sort of prevalent, that doesn't cheapen your brand. So look at things like adding, add-ons like free meeting room time. So if you sign up, for this price, for the rest of 2020, we'll give you like free meeting room time for 6 months into 2021 for kind of add-on, just to kind of, again, the offer is very contingent on who you are and what your competition looks like. And it may not be for everyone, but you should have a reasonably good offer, especially if you need to have that at the ready, whether you publish that on your website or not. I think that's a really important piece right there. So I'm just going to kind of just show you just a quick offer here right now. If you wanted to get help with any of this stuff, I run a membership program called Everspaces Nation. It's a private Slack community. We do monthly Q&As, monthly webinars, kind of like this, usually with just me. And then we've got more than a year's worth of Q&A call recordings, templates, checklists. There's a whole course, like a fundamentals course that covers all areas of your so there's a whole bunch there. I'm offering just an annual plan for 50% off. It's using promo code Navigate50. So if you cost option to work with me, if you're in the multi-location sphere and you've got a lot going on, there's things I can do for you. This probably won't be for you, but if you're kind of that one small space, I think for what, $33 a month for a year, something like that, you'd be kind of crazy not to go for that. So I just wanted to put that out there. So many of you are already in my group. Some of you aren't, but if you wanted to get involved, we've got a whole COVID-19 there as well. And I'm in there every day helping as much as I can. So you can go to everspaces.com/nation on that. And then of course, I've got a resource just for what our co-working space is doing during this time. So if you're looking for examples of member communications, or if you're looking for resources from places like the Global Workspace Association, and various other kind of platforms that are, things that they're producing to help you navigate this stuff, and Juicy and a few others, that's the place to go. And I'll be updating that pretty regularly. And then of course, if you want to contact, so Sean would be the finance guy. I'm very specific about what I offer. I stay in my lane. I'm a marketing consultant, not a finance guy, or not a business generalist. So Sean would be questions. Yeah, I'd love to flip it over here. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, and we'll go to some kind of questions in the Q&A. All right. Thank you all for participating. We've got a few questions in here, so I'll start just from the top here. First one is for Sean. So maybe Sean, you can tackle this one. I'd like to dive in on how to manage clients, especially those who look for aggressive reductions like 50% off. Currently reading Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss, which is focused on middle ground, which is a good book. I'd love to discuss. Any thoughts on that, Sean? Oh, what do I got to do here? I think you just have to unmute yourself. There you go.
Awesome.
There you go.
Yeah. Yeah. So I love Chris Voss. I love his book, and I think the fundamental here, I think, is those things are going to happen, right? People are going to be requesting this kind of stuff, because I effectively told everybody on this webinar to do the same thing. Right? To go out and actually start having conversations with your suppliers. A lot of the time you guys are the landlords. So it is about looking at the model, right? What are you willing to be providing? What kind of sweeteners can you add in, first of all, that don't really impact your cash? That's the first thing to look at, right? Meeting room hours, whatever that is for those various folks. But don't respond, collect as much of those requests as possible. And don't respond to them one-off with unique solutions. You want to come up with a united front. So you want to collect them and say, listen, give us a few days to see what we can do, and have that conversation with your team. Model it out and see what is the floor, what can you not absolutely do, right? And have that conversation leaning in and saying, listen, I want to work with you, collaborate, because I really care about you as a member, and I want you to stick with us. This is what I'm willing to offer, and this is what we're willing to do across the board. Meeting folks halfway is really going to help through this process. Not that you have to slash things 50%. That's not necessarily the right thing to do, but it is about looking at what is that what is that offer going for 50% of the way through? So some of my clients, we're actually looking at bringing folks down that are on a monthly membership to that are just generally co-working flex members down to a virtual membership, just to say, listen, this is what we're going to be pivoting to in the short term while we go into a bit of a hibernation mode from a cost control perspective. If you can find a way to reduce rent by a little bit, or defer rent payments or anything like that, and then find a way to possibly reduce your manpower just temporarily, maybe that's a temp layoff, or maybe scaling down hours. I know that that's not necessarily what people want to do, because there's a lot of folks out there that want to help offer virtual support, right? Community managers and your staff could really help people right now. But it is about kind of like going into a bit of a shrinking cost control mode. And then most of the costs, other than marketing and some of the support costs, professional services, some of the contractual, printing rentals and things like that, you can maybe negotiate. Most of that stuff is operational costs that will shrink down anyways if you were to close down for 2 months. So there is a way to actually really get lean as a co-working space. And if that's the case, you can lean a little bit further into offerings for your folks so that you can maintain the membership levels. And then you can kind of pick back up, hopefully, when the smoke clears. So I don't want to necessarily say, yes, we're gonna take 50% off, but it is about that collaboration and knowing where your floor is. A lot of folks don't know that. So the first thing to do would be to cost that out. Suggested handling, sorry, I'm just reading this because I think there's another one for me here. And suggested handling on deferrals of costs versus elimination. Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure that you can't take rent right off the board. I don't think that's going to be an option for a lot of folks. There's partnership agreements in place. People are going to be pretty protective with their contracts, but they're willing to work with you. Defer what you can. Take out and completely scale down to zero. Don't eliminate the relationship, but just say, listen, we're going to scale down our service demand just for the next 2 months, and just communicate early and often with your suppliers. That's the best thing that you can do. Don't just say you're done, you're dead to me, no more, because that's obviously not going to work for a lot of people. People want to keep their books of business intact. They don't want to destroy their books of business. They just want to scale up, scale down, flex that. So if you can help them do that in a way that still respects the integrity of the supplier relationship, that's absolutely what to do there.
Great answer.
Kevin, it looks like you've got a active campaign question.
There's one, I think, more from Abigail. Can you give examples of expenses that are rev generating versus non-rev in a co-working model?
For sure. Revenue generating would be some of the marketing expenses, right? Obviously, anything that is going to be investing in your membership retention, membership service right now, and then new membership generation. Maybe that's going to be a challenging one in the next month or so, but down the line, for sure, make sure that you're set, like Kevin said, setting up yourself so that when the smoke clears, you're ready to hit the ground running in a stronger way than stronger than ever before. And I love Kevin's points on just folks slowing down, focusing internally, and really driving on that. But then the non-revenue generating expenses are things that just you have to do, obviously, because your co-working space is open. So janitorial services, there's things like food expenses, obviously everything like that. If you're going to be closing, you just need to have a conversation with your suppliers and really ramp those down so you can get those off the cash flow, and do whatever you can to kind of shrink down, because the companies that are able to be flexible from a cost perspective right now are the ones that are going to do the best, maintain the most cash. And cash in your bank account is king right now. You're going to hear it a lot, but that is very, very true.
Yeah, that's a good example. And for another example, Abigail, would be something like Zoom. So many of you are just or Slack, if you're doing, you could do a free version of Slack, but like Zoom. So if you're doing these Zoom calls with all your members and it's cost you $49 a month, but it maintains your community and allows you to continue charging, technically that's a rev generator. It supports you continuing to generate revenue. Whereas maybe I don't know, you're paying back your debt on furniture, I don't know, might not be currently, and you may have to find ways to be creative there. You don't have an option to not pay Zoom now if you want to do that, but just a thought for an example. I think Sean, Mark had a follow-up question about your cash flow worksheet. Will that be available? He asks, and yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. Cash flow worksheet is available. It's very templated out based on just a standard co-working space and then a traditional business. Happy to walk somebody through that directly if that's needed. So I'm going to follow up with that after this. So absolutely.
Great. I'm going to jump to Mark's question here. And if you have anyone who has follow-up questions, feel free to jump them in there or whatever. Kevin asks, so quickly, why am I recommending ActiveCampaign versus the behemoth Salesforce, or Google has one called Copper? What I like about ActiveCampaign is a whole bunch of things. One is they'll migrate you for free from whatever platform you're on. Two is that it offers email news marketing as well as your CRM in one place. So as you're tagging people and as you're bringing them through the sales funnel and getting them onto your newsletter, it shows the entire life cycle of the business. You can also, integrate it with pretty much anything. So I just like how you can manage the relationship from a sales straight through to marketing perspective. Salesforce is very expensive relative to ActiveCampaign. It's also very clunky. It also doesn't really, it doesn't have email automation. Their sister company, Pardot, is their email automation tool. And it's like, I don't know, it feels like I'm flashed back to the early 90s. It's really hard to use and I don't recommend it. It's meant for large corporations that have kind of an in-house tech department. And as far as Copper, I know someone uses Copper and loves it, isn't an advocate for it necessarily, but it does integrate with Google's Mail. So if you're sort of a one-person shop, you may like that you can in the sidebar and Google kind of appearing, and you can integrate those two right there. But as far as I know, it doesn't do the email marketing and email automation stuff. So in terms of one tool that'll really run your business, I find ActiveCampaign is like the less expensive version of HubSpot. HubSpot forces you to pay, to learn their platform. Their support isn't as good. They don't offer as free migrations on the lower tiers. Whereas, with ActiveCampaign, as soon as you sign up, someone will call you within an hour or two after a free trial. They'll onboard you for free. They give you like 4 or 5 calls one-on-one to get you set up and answer questions. And then they have 30-minute calls one-on-one with anybody at any time. So like, as far as support goes, it's just insane how much value they offer and the integration piece. So it's what I hoped HubSpot would be, but isn't. And I find it's the best tool for that combination of things. Good to scale with over time. You're very welcome. Yeah, and I'll be doing more training on that in Everspaces Nation as well. And Jamie Russo and I which will probably come out in the fall or late summer at this point, but we'll be going really deep on ActiveCampaign, sales processes, and integrating that with the rest of your process. And maybe we'll get Sean did a great talk at the GWA conference about the perfect tour, and maybe we'll get some of his expertise in on that program as well. I'll keep going through some of these. So Lisa asks, what can we add to the virtual membership to make it more appealing to members and prospects? So I think first and foremost, if you can do some kind of a mail and telephone service or telephone service, that's going to be a good core offering. A lot of people don't have a business address anymore. Maybe their co-working space or their office, they're not currently active in it. So there will be some more demand for, and this is why Google Ads strategically is a good idea. There will be more demand for it in general. I think for a good, virtual program in general, I think if you can add, the advantage co-working has, and this isn't a good time for it now, but you can do little add-ons or little bonuses like 1 hour free meeting room time per month, or work in our space for 1 or 2 days per month, or whatever the thing is, which your local FedEx box or postal box wouldn't be able to offer. So it gives you the same advantages as those, the typical virtual mail stuff, and a whole bunch of other like little things that would add a lot of value for not much more cost on your, or no cost extra for you. But in the short term, I think it's all about bringing the community online. Some people are doing daily Zoom webinars, educating people. They're bringing in experts like Sean, or like their accountants, or their marketing people, whatever. And they're really just trying to educate the community. There is also that entertainment piece that we kind of talked about. So, playing virtual games, if you can do tournaments like, chess tournaments, or some kind of thing that people can kind of passively do to keep people engaged. Really thinking outside the box as much as you can, and fostering an online community inside of Slack, and adding those extra values. But the other thing is being a resource, and if you can give them discounts for the local accounting shop as a member, right? If you can work out a deal with them to kind of save them costs as they come into tax preparation period, or any other kind of partnerships you can make to make that value add as great as possible. So I don't know if that fully answers your question, Lisa, but those are some of the things that I'm seeing people are doing.
Just to just add to that as well, I know just maybe hammer that point home. I think obviously the most of your members are small business owners, and I may be biased on this because this is what I do, but my God, there is an opportunity here to support small business, and Kevin said it. Anything that you can do to support the needs of small business owners through this time. Kevin's services are like support around how to market DIY, cash flow forecasting support, all of these things like really needed. And it will really help your member retention because you don't want any of these folks going out of business, right? So it is about leaning into that as much as possible. I'm doing a ton of webinars for my clients and their members just to funnel a ton of different support their way. And I think that just really leaning into that support right now and curating, listening to them, calling them and saying, listen, what kind of support do you need right now? What do you need right now in your business right now to help you this week? And then curate experts. If you need anybody that understands accounting, marketing, obviously go to Kevin. Anything around the tax stuff, let me know. I've got a ton of people in my network that can support and are just making evenings and weekends available, including myself and Kevin, for extra support to people for free, just to make sure that we're leaning into this as much as possible. Yeah.
And I think that going back to Sean's original point about talking to every single member, and that'll get you really clear on what the current internal status is of your existing members, and you'll know what to offer based on that. And I think now is the time to be the most customer-centric business in your industry and in your market. So really it's about starting zoomed in on that individual and then figuring out how you can solve problems for them. Like nothing is off the table. It's an innovator's game right now, I think, as far as that's concerned. I'm going to call that answered, but if you've got any follow-up questions, please don't hesitate. Mark asked about your worksheet, so that we've talked about, that will be available. I'll also put together some notes on this and I'll give you any extra resources that I can that we've talked about. And it looks like Mark is cool on the active campaign. So I look forward to helping you get that set up. I know you're a member. And so it looks like we've reached the end of it. Again, our contact information, I'll put it back on the screen if you want to see that. Sean is a great resource. Be sure to tap into him if you need anything, and so am I as well. You can always join the membership there as well for a very low price if you want kind of one-on-one help. It's a discount on the annual plan, but I'll be there. All I'll be doing is helping you weather this storm. So if you're a single location space, I'll be there ready to help you. Just use Navigate50 as the promo code, or email me directly. Again, our contact information is right there. I thank you all for joining, and I look forward to, and thank you, Sean, for giving me your time on such short notice. I just asked him, I think for last Friday or this Monday or something, and he's like, yep, I'll do this. So thank you, Sean. I really appreciate it.
No problem, Kevin. And if anybody wants, just to take 30 minutes next week to walk through the cash flow models or any sort of ideas, I am opening up a ton of space next week for helping folks through this stuff. So do not hesitate to reach out.
Okay. Thank you all. We'll leave it there, and wish you all the very best. We're here to help. So if you're really, really struggling, please just reach out to us and let us help you, because that's what we're here for. Thanks again, and enjoy the rest of your day.